Lesson 3.2, Solving Equations Having Like Terms and Parentheses. Like terms and distributive property. Using the distributive property and combining like terms prepares an equation for solving. It's like building a model. Using the distributive property to take the addition or subtraction out of the parentheses is like taking the model pieces out of the box. Simplifying the equation by combining like terms is like grouping the similar pieces of the model together. So you can begin building. Once those steps are complete, solving the equation follows the familiar steps of clearing the constant and coefficient. Example 1. A group of 5 friends are going to a baseball game. Tickets for the game cost $12 each, or $60 for the group. The group also wants to eat at the game. Hot dogs cost $2.75 each, and bottled water cost $1.25 each. The group has a total budget of $76. If the group buys the same number of hot dogs and bottles of water, how many can they afford? Well, let's let n represent the number of hot dogs and the number of bottles of water. Okay, remember they have to be the same because it says it right here, the same number of hot dogs and bottles of water. So n is our variable. That means that $2.75 is the price of the hot dog. We can multiply that by n to represent the cost of n hot dogs, which we don't know how many we're buying yet. That's the question. How many can they afford to buy? And $1.25 is the cost of the water times n to represent the cost of the bottles of water. Let's write the verbal model. So we have the cost of hot dogs. And again, verbal model is words where you're going to eventually put in numbers. The cost of the bottled water, and of course the cost of the tickets to get in. And remember, we have $76 to spend. Well, the cost of hot dogs we found up here, $2.75 times n. The cost of the bottled water is $1.25 times n. We don't know how many bottles of water we're going to buy yet. And the cost of the tickets is $12 each, which means how many people are going? 5. So that's 5 times 12, which is 60, for a total budget of $76. So how many hot dogs and bottled waters can we afford? First thing we have to do is combine like terms. We're going to put these two numbers together, and we're going to get $4 times n. We're going to spend $4 for our hot dog and our bottled water total. Bring down the 60. Bring down the 76. Now you should see that you have a two-step problem. Do you see that? That's two-step. If you're not sure how to recognize a two-step, please ask me. You need to look for when it's being multiplication or division and then adding or subtracting to the variable. First thing we need to do is clear the constant. So we subtract 60 from each side. Again, they set it up horizontally. I like to set it up vertically. You end up with the 60s crossing out on the left, so you're left with 4n, and 76 minus 60 is 16. Now we got to get rid of 4 that's being multiplied to n, so the inverse of that is dividing, and that's what they do here, is divide every side by 4. n equals 4. This was simplifying our problem. You can see that the directions on the right-hand side are pretty much telling you the steps for how you need to do this. You can see I put step 1, combine like terms. Step 2, subtract 60 from each side. Simplifying is also actually just part of step 2. We just kind of do it. And then step 3 is divide. And then finally, again, we simplify by solving what we did in step 3. That means you can afford 4 hot dogs and 4 bottles of water. So somebody's not getting a hot dog or a water. Example 2. This time we have distributive property. First of all, separate the problem. Look for the variable. This is the side you want to clear. Clear this side. There's the variable. First thing I need to do, add the opposite. That is technically -1. Now we need to distribute. Distributive properties always has to happen first. It's a parentheses. Order of operations, parentheses come first. 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times -1 is -6x. Bring down the addition sign. Now we have a two-step problem. So the first step in our two-step problem, which is the second step in this problem, is to clear the constant. 12 is the constant and it's positive. So I want to add the opposite, which is a -12. So I'm adding -12. They like to subtract. I'm going to add the opposites. Change out my subtractions. So now that I can add -12 to both sides, the 12's on the right, clear. That's the whole point, to get x by itself. -24 plus -12 is -36. Bring down -6x. Here is the x on the right side. This is multiplication, so we divide by -6 on both sides. That's step 3. 6 is clear. You're left with x. Good sign. -36 divided by -6 is +6. There's your answer. You can always go back and check by placing it back in for the x and seeing if it makes sense. Example 2. You still have distributive property. See the parentheses, multiplication of a number next to it? First of all, before we do anything else, we need to add the opposites. It's something we just do. I don't even make it a step. Step 1, distributive property. -2 times 7, -2 times -4. You get -14 plus 8x equals 10. Here's your two-step problem. First step in my two-step problem is to add 14. We add the opposite, which is +14, to each side. The 14's clear on the left side. You're left with 8x, and then 10 plus 14 is 24. How do I clear the 8? Divide. Both sides by 8. 24 divided by 8 is 3. Again, plug it back in. Check to see if it makes sense. Example 3 is combining like terms after you distribute. Remember, distributive property is always the first thing you have to solve because it's parentheses. Okay, write the equation, and we know that we need to add the opposites of our subtraction. Now, do you see parentheses? Right next to it's the multiplying of -4. There's your distributive property. You need to be able to start figuring out how to find it in a problem. Step 1, distribute. -4 times x, and again they put subtracting. I like to change mine to adding negatives. And then -4 times -1 is +4. Step 2 is to combine like terms. This is the part that we added from the previous examples. You can see 6x and -4x are like terms. Different signs, so I subtract. 6 minus 4 is +2x plus 4. Now you have a two-step problem. You will always end with a two-step problem and eventually one step to get the answer. Constant is 4, so we add the opposite, which is -4. The 4's on the left cancel each other out. That's 0. Bring down the 2x. 14 plus -4 is +10. Last step is the one-step problem, which is divide each side by 2. 10 divided by 2 is +5. You can still go back and check your work. Plug in the 5 and check to see if this makes sense. Do parentheses, then multiply 4. 30 minus 16 is indeed 14, so it checks. At this point, please solve the equation. Remember to look for your distributive property first. It might not always be there, but if it is, you need to solve it first. Then combine any of your like terms. Then you have a two-step, so you need to add or add the opposite. And then the last thing you're going to do is multiply or divide. And a lot of times we've been dividing, but you could multiply the coefficient. We add the opposite of the constant. You might want to write this down. These are the steps that you need to know in order to simplify. Pause the video and try these problems. Number 1, you should see distributive property. Distribute the 5, 15. Because of that 1 there, it's negative 5x. Bring down the negative 20. Try to keep your equal sign in line and keep the x on the right side. You don't need to be moving things around. Clear the constants. So we did distributive property. There is no like terms. So now I can add the opposite of the constant. So I'm going to add negative 15. Negative 35 equals, that clears, negative 5x. Divide by the coefficient. Your answer is positive 7. Again, you can always go back and check. This is definitely something you want to do before you hand in anything that's graded. Number 2, change subtraction to adding the opposite. Now let's look at our steps. No distributive property, so skip that. Combine like terms. I do see that there's a y and a y, so let's combine them together and rewrite the problem. Make it a clean, new problem. Add the opposite. 7y is left over. Equal sign. 42. Divide by the coefficient is last. Y equals 6. Number 3. Add the opposite. You have parentheses, so it's a good chance it's distributive property, which it is. Distribute the negative 3, negative 18, plus positive 6x equals 12. There's no like terms to combine, so now I'm on a two-step. Add the opposite of the constant. You get 6x. I'm going to move down here. I don't have enough space. Equals 30. Divide by 6. X equals 5. Again, check your work. And then the last problem, add the opposites first. Do you see the parentheses with your distributive property? Distribute the negative 2, negative 2x plus positive 6. Bring down the other terms that I have not used, including the equal sign and 30. Now, step 2, combine like terms. 3x plus 6 equals 30. Subtract the constant, which is adding the opposite. I always like to say adding the opposite besides subtracting. Then divide by the coefficient. X equals positive 8.